first finish this. So we have lecture 30. So if you remember in the last class, I was talking about different types of cache. Mainly I talked about direct map cache. Okay, where we have seen that how the hit time, how the miss rates are affecting the performance, and what do we mean by different kind of right miss, right hit, and what are the strategies which can be adopted. Now cache memory, there is one part. So before I actually go to the arithmetic logic part, a cache memory can also be designed using hierarchical cache memory. So this is your processor. You can have the cache here in the initial or the nearest cache is basically called L1 cache. So you have something like this. You can have another cache here, which is like this. We call it L2 cache. And then it goes on. You can even go for L3 cache, okay, which are usually DRAM cache. But for the time being, we can ignore that. And you can assume that this is the memory. So when the processor looks for one instruction or data, it first searches into the L1 cache. So processor first searches into L1 cache. If it is hit, then fine, it directly gets it. So you can have different hit time. So for example, this may take one clock cycle. This may take maybe 10 clock cycles. This may take maybe hundreds of clock cycles. So accordingly, your effective access time will be calculated. So this will be hit. Now this may have X percentage of hit. This may have Y percentage of hit, and obviously this will be always hit because any program that is going to be executed must be available in the memory. Okay. This design can go up to L1, L2, L3, and then memory, primary memory, or main memory. This way, cache is organized. Now, for obvious reason, because this is the closest one, you may say that why we are not putting everything on L1. The technologies are different, so the price will be different. This will be much expensive. This will be less expensive. This will be even lesser expensive. But highly costing. This is moderate cost. This is low cost. So obviously, due to this reason, you always spend based on your available amount of based on your available budget. You would like to spend money according to whatever is available to you. Okay. Now, the factors which actually affect the average access time are mainly due to these numbers. Now these numbers are directly proportional to the size. If you have more amount of L1 cache, your hit rate will high in L1 cache. But that is at the expense of more price. What we see, if because of the difference, I have written here 10, 1 clock cycles, 10 clock cycles. Usually L1 and L2 cache has a difference between hundreds of order. So if it is say 1 tau, it may be 100 tau. Okay. Then you can understand that even 1% miss leads to a average memory access time is getting highly affected. Even if 1% misses here, that means 99% hit. Okay. Because of that 1%, you need to access to L2 cache, which takes 100 clock cycles. Okay. Or even in this case also 10 clock cycle. Then 10% miss here leads to average memory access time almost gets doubled. Okay, now you can imagine that what will happen here. So these are the factors which designers actually keep in mind while they propose that how much amount of money you want to spend on L1 cache, how much money you want to spend on L2 cache. Obviously, it also depends that how do you write the program. Now, if I give you a very simple overview that how program actually access that, let's assume that we have a 2-dimensional array. So 2-dimensional array, this is an interesting problem. Actually, we will discuss all these more advanced issues in high performance computing architecture. I'm just giving you an overview. So let's say this is an array A. Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6 rows and 7 columns. Okay. Now the elements are so assume that each and every element takes some space, maybe 4 bytes if they are integer. Okay. Now this is one integer, this is another integer, this is another integer. So you store 7 integers. You store another 7 integers and this way. So this is basically A1, A2, A3 this way stored. A4, A5, A6, A7, this is A8. Okay. A15 and so on and so forth. Now, if your cache block has a limitation, say this is the cache memory and it has some limitations. Limitation means size limitation. This is block 0, this is block 1 or cache line 0, line 1, whatever you call it. When you bring this, you bring the entire content. Okay. When you bring something from the memory or secondary memory, secondary cache or main memory to the L1 cache, let's assume that this is a L1 cache. You are bringing something from memory to here. Now, if your arrangement of data in memory is in row order, so you will bring that row. Let's assume that this is 7 into 4. The size is 7 into 4. So it can store 7 integers here. Now you bring that during the first miss. So you bring it here. Now if your access pattern in your program is like this, what will happen? You brought the first row and put it into L1 block 0 of L1 cache, assuming that it will exploit the temporal locality. Okay. But your next access as per the program is A8. So even if you brought the whole block here from memory to the cache, because of your access pattern, you'll again get a miss for A8. So it is not only how the cache is organized, but also it depends on how your access pattern is. And based on your memory access pattern, your cache utilization or average memory access time AMAT, average memory access time AMAT will vary. So being a programmer, you also exploit all these things. Now the question is, as a high level programmer, how do you know? That is the reason all these things are taken care by compiler. So when we write compiler, so when you will be a compiler designer, you must know this. As a high level programmer, you may not be exploiting all these features. But when you will become a compiler designer, you must take care of all these things, because your compiler will be used by a high level programmer who may not be knowing about this exploitation. But you must ensure that while you generate the code and provide the instructions to the operating systems, program related instructions, because compilers not only generate code, they also generate optimized code. They also talk with the operating system to understand the architecture and available cache blocks and other parameters, so that the code can be efficiently executed on a machine. If you are aware that many softwares, libraries are available to boost up the performance of existing libraries. Typically, those who provide hardware devices, they also provide the support of library. Now those libraries are actually designed by people like who understand the architecture and who also understand the behavior of the program. So as a computer engineer, we not only write programs, we also write programs depending on the availability of the resource, so that the resources are utilized properly. And so we should not be writing program as a dumb programmer without basically thinking about that what will be the effect of writing such a program when you have resource limitations. Okay, so that is the basic difference between somebody learning C programming from any other organization, and somebody is basically learning C programming and understanding the concept of architecture and operating systems in the engineering syllabus. That is what the essence are, and that is what the difference is. And when you people will be joining industries, I know that these days many of you will be preferring to join those banking sector jobs and other things because of higher package and other things. There also you will understand that why they will recruit you, because of your analytical skills. That how do you exploit the existing resources in a better way so that the overall performance improves. Okay. So that is what I wanted to tell about the cache memory part before I go to the next topic. Okay, if you have any doubt, anything, you can ask me. Anyway, all these advanced topics will be discussed in the HPCA, high performance computing architecture, which will be offered probably when you will be in your 8th semester. Okay, then you can learn these things. Okay, So that's it for cache memory. Let me, if you have any doubt, any query, you can ask me. Otherwise, I'll go to the next topic, which is arithmetic logic unit.
So that blocks which you were talking about is basically frames, right?
Yes, yes, these are frames.
Okay, sir.
Frames, page, block, what cache line, whatever you call it, they're almost same. We assume that block size equals to word in some of the examples which I took, which I discussed in the last class. But a block means basically one frame. Now, the next part of our discussion is arithmetic logic unit. I believe that you have already gone through the basic adders, subtractor, multiplier circuits. Yeah, is it not true? You have done it already, huh?
Added, subtracted, sir.
Adder, subtractor. So let me show you. So what? So I will start with adder. Even though these things are not, I'm not teaching in detail, but these are part of your syllabus. Okay. Simple adder design like full adder, half adder, all these things are, you should not assume that these are not part of your syllabus, because I presume that you know these basic things. Okay. So you can have different philosophy of designing adders. Let me here basically, to make it simple, let me show you the presentation, because these circuits I do not want to spend time on designing these circuits today. Is it visible, my PPT slide?
Yes, sir.
This is Professor Sarangi's slides. I will share with you. So this is a half adder, you know, circuit, you know, full adder, truth table, you know, and the equations, you know. The circuit is very simple. Now, the point is, if you apply full adders or half adders to implement n-bit numbers, addition of two n-bit numbers. So like this, we have one number here 1011, another number is 0101. So if you carefully observe, when we add the LSB with another LSB, it takes some time. Even if it is an OR gate, AND gate, or half adder, it takes time. So this gate delays you cannot ignore. If you look into this, there is some gate delay. This NOT gate takes some time. This NOT gate takes some time. This AND gate takes time. This AND gate takes time. Okay. So each of these gates are taking time. Now, so that means when you give the input A and B, to get the output S, you don't get it instantaneously. Even if the delay is very small, but when you add up all these delays, the maximum delay, so for example, in this circuit, you have three gate delay. One is the delay of the NOT gate, delay of the AND gate, delay of the OR gate. And all these delays will be added together, and your final delay for S is like this. Now we are talking about sequential circuits. In the entire course, we talked about mostly we talked about sequential circuits, where flip-flops, counters, and other units are there. So we actually have relied heavily on memory elements. Now those circuits are primarily driven by clocks, which are basically used to provide synchronization, that at right time a circuit will receive the inputs. Now, if this delay varies, you may say that this is half adder only, it will be only 3 gates delay. I know that this delay is a fixed amount of delay, but keep adding on so many half adders may lead to a large amount of delay. And that may lead to a circuit where we have different amount of path. Now assume that you have a circuit here. I don't know what is the circuit. So this is circuit 1. This is another circuit. It takes some number of inputs. It also takes some number of inputs. So X is going here, Y is going here. It's not a single bit, it may be multiple bits. Now if the output,
paper is not visible.
yeah. So if the outputs are taken here in circuit 3. Okay, because this x1 or x, the values of x, they pass through circuit 1, and this one has a T1 amount of delay and this one has a T2 amount of delay. But the circuit 3 can produce result or can produce correct result when both the values T1 and both the values, so let's assume that this is Y1, say x1, this is x, this is x1, this is y, this is y1. When both the values x1 and y1 are available together. Now, if this one takes T1 amount of delay and this one takes T2 amount of delay, it's difficult to know that when circuit 3 provides the correct answer. So let's assume this is a Z1. But your objective is to get that Z1 must be consistent always. So what is our objective?
So your screen is very blurry.
So if you look into this, this is X is the input. Now it is correct. Screen is fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If X is the input, Y is another input. X goes through a circuit 1, Y goes through circuit 2. X has a delay of T1, Y has a delay of T2, or sorry, circuit 1 has a delay of T1, circuit 2 has a delay of T2. But circuit 3 requires both X1 and Y1 together to generate Z1. So our objective should be to optimize circuit 1 and circuit 2. It may be an adder, it may be a multiplier, whatever may be the circuit. We want these optimized circuits, and once we know that's the optimized circuit and we know that how much amount of time it takes, then we use them and probably put some kind of buffer if required, so that both the values reach to the next circuit at the same time. So in any digital circuit, once your design is correct, you know that this circuit will work, you'll have to do this part. Objective is to optimize circuit 1 and circuit 2, or minimize, you can say the minimize. Optimize, I am saying in a sense, sometimes you cannot minimize further. So what you will have to do, one circuit you cannot minimize it. What you will have to do, this circuit has already been optimized and it is taking a lesser amount of time. What you will have to do, this has also been minimized, but there is a difference. Then you will have to add up something here. Some delay circuits should be given here so that both are actually reaching to the output at the same time. That's why I will say optimize. So you need to optimize these circuits so that they can be useful as independent units. Okay, so this is one important part. While basically we once we are ready with our design, conceptual design, like we are doing it in the whole semester using Logisim. Once we know that, then we look into each and every circuit carefully and we see that whether these circuits can be really useful, because my clock has a frequency of this. I know that the next positive edge comes to the input of a particular sequential circuit at this time. So whether my inputs are available or not. If not, then I may not get correct result. So keeping in mind, all circuits need optimization. Okay. So now let me go back to my presentation again. So even if we know that these half adder, full adders, these are common circuits, but you see a full adder, the carry out function has two gate delays. One is for AND operation, another one is for OR operation. Okay, assume that we have a 3 input OR gate available. Similarly, the sum which has 3 gate delays, because you need AND is NOT operation, complementary signals are needed, then AND. So AND or NOT circuits needed. Now, like this one delay here, another delay here, another delay here. So when you provide the input A, B, C in, you get the output S after 3 units of gate delays. Assume that all these gates are actually having the same amount of delay, even though it may not be true. But for the sake of simplicity, we can assume that they're taking same amount of time. It still has 3 units of delay. Now, if it goes like this, so a 3-unit delay here, followed by another 3-unit delay here, followed by another 3-unit delay here, followed by another 3-unit delay here. And if you assume that you have such n-bit numbers, 2 n-bit numbers, which need to be added, and each bit addition, like this is 1 bit addition, it takes 1 unit of time. Let's assume that the entire time of this 3 gate is 1 unit. So for n such additions, because the second addition cannot proceed unless the result of the first addition is available. So we actually we keep adding pair of bits and proceed from the LSB to MSB. If a carry is generated, we add it to the next pair of bits. At the last step, if carry is generated, then it becomes the MSB of the result. So this carry, effectively, it ripples through the bits. That's why it is called ripple carry adder. And if you analyze the complexity of the circuit, you will find that the final result, see, the point is you may get this result very quickly. A0 or C0, if you say this is ABC, D, let's assume that the result is D0 or S0. S0, you will be getting it very quickly, or S1, you will be getting it very quickly. But what about Sn? The result is not complete. The entire result cannot be given to the next circuit unless the full result is available. You cannot give them partial results. So even if you get the sum 0, S1, S2, S3, S4 earlier than other bits of the sum, you cannot give them to the next circuit, because you do not know that how the next circuit is going to use them. So ripple carry adder has one drawback. What is the drawback? The size of it is basically proportional to the size of the data. The time of the addition is linearly proportional to the size of the data. So a simple thing, it's order of n. Order of n. If you do it, all half adder, there will be 1/2 adder time is th. So essentially it will be order of n. Do you agree with me? N bit
Yes.
addition, you order of n, and all these things you know. So time complexity of replicate adder is order of n. So can we improve it? That is what we are going to look into. Can it do better than order of n? So that is what the carry select adder does. It's a circuit which actually performs the addition operation in order of root n time. How? It's a very simple modification with a bit of additional hardware. It can actually implement this. How? This logic all of you know that you have been given a big problem. Okay, each problem, big problem, you divide it into say smaller problems and compute the smaller problems separately, parallelly. Compute the smaller problems parallelly. But here is a catch. The catch is this next smaller problem is dependent on the result of the previous smaller problem. Then how can you do it parallelly? Now here is the catch. When I am talking about dependent on the previous smaller problem, so this is a smaller problem, this is another smaller problem, this is another smaller problem. This small problem is dependent on the result of this smaller problem. Now, is it really dependent on the whole result of the small problem? No. It is only dependent on the MSB of the previous smaller problem. Now, we are talking about binary decisions. That means this carry propagating across blocks can be either 0 or 1. It cannot be more than that. Do you agree with me? This carry can be either 0 or 1. So if I generate, somebody was saying something?
Yes, clear.
Yes. So if I generate both 0 carry and 1 carry together without knowing even that what actually it gives, then I can actually provide the input to this. Without even knowing that what will be the final result of this one. I assume that the carry is 0 as well as the carry is 1. So I will design two circuits for this. One takes as carry 0, another takes as carry 1. Similarly, I will do the same thing here, and this goes on. So in the first stage, what it will do, it will perform parallel additions. But parallel additions with two different circuits. One circuit takes the input carry as 0 and the circuit takes the input carry as 1. So if you look into this, let me now so in this case the carry propagates across blocks. The carry propagates across blocks. Now we add the numbers in each block in parallel. In stage 1, what we do, there are two stages. For each block, stage 1 produces two results. Assuming an carry input carry is 0 and assuming an input carry is 1. Okay. Assuming an input carry of 0 and assuming an input carry of 1. Now you tell me that how many, so all these blocks can run parallelly. All these blocks can run parallelly. Now if I divide the entire problem into small blocks, okay, and I apply parallel additions for these small blocks, double additions. Additions means will be one adder will work with input carry 0, another adder will work with input carry 1 for the same block, and it goes on. So all can be done parallelly. Now let's assume that you divide the entire input into blocks where each block has a size of k. Each block has a size of k. So how many blocks will be there? N by k blocks. You have n by k blocks and each block has a k size. Now k size means that k sized block is a ripple carry adder. How much time it takes? K amount of time. And because you have n by k number of blocks, you'll have to select the carry. You'll have to select the sum. So that selection of the sum takes n by k time. Because all selections cannot be done together unless the previous block's result is available. You can't do it. Okay. So that's why for each block we have two results available. K sum bits and one carry out bit. Now this carry out bit you do not know. That carry out bit you only know that when the sum is available. Now the sum is available after k amount of time because that is the time ripple carry adder takes to add k bit numbers. So in the stage 2 what happens? You start the least significant block. The input carry is 0. Choose the appropriate result from stage 1. We know that the input carry for the second block. So we go ahead. So in this fashion, if you basically do it, our block size we assume that k. So stage 1 takes k units of time because this is a ripple carry adder and all are parallelly happening. Ripple carry adder all are parallelly happening. So total time takes stage 1 takes k units of time. There are how many blocks? N by k blocks. So stage 2 takes n by 2 units. Why n by 2 units? Because you'll have to select them either positive or negative. Okay. So the total time becomes k plus n by k. If you basically do a simple minimization, you will find that after doing a differentiation, you will find that k equals to k becomes a root n. So whenever you have a 16-bit number, okay, you can actually generate a carry save adder which produces results in root 16 time. Okay, so this adder's time complexity becomes order of root n. Okay. So total time is basically k plus n by k. Total time is k plus n by k. Now k equals to root n. Root n plus n by root n. So it will be root n plus root n, 2 root n. So it's basically order of root n. So this is basically carry save adder. Idea is clear? Anyone has any doubt?
Fine.
Okay. Now, can we do better? Yes, even we can do further better. Look ahead adder. I believe that look ahead adder has also been discussed in your class, which basically uses the generate and propagate function. And we know that how these generate and propagate functions are written. So generate is basically it's an AND operation, propagate is an exclusive OR operation. Okay, and we basically find out these recursive solutions. Okay, and all these things you know it. Okay, because I believe that ripple carry adder and carry look ahead adders have been discussed in your digital electronics course, I just introduced carry save order, which probably you have already implemented earlier. Okay, so these are again all these things, you know it. I'm not going to repeat this, but if you carefully understand that how basically the problem can be mapped to a log n problem, so it's basically with these simple generative and functions. Okay. So this one actually takes, it's a basically divide and conquer policy, and which basically compute G and P functions in order of log n time, and the entire operation can be realized because this is basically a log n operation. Things can be represented using a binary tree kind of fashion, and you know that it usually will be order of log n. Okay, so these things you can look into this presentation slide, you can get it. So this is very simple way it has been discussed. Okay, so we have three different adders. One works on order of n, one works on order of root n, one works on order of log n. Obviously, what we will see that as we go for order of n to order of root n to order of log n, even the time gets reduced, but hardware cost improves, hardware cost increases, obviously because of the additional decision making units which need to be included into the circuit designing. Okay, so that is what, as a designer, even if tomorrow you can come up with a better solution, okay, you say that no, I have observed that there are some operations where this particular function can be improved, so you can probably come up with a better solution. You may even come up with a solution which is applicable to a particular type of problems. Okay, it may not be a generic one, like what these days ASIC processors, like DSP processors, there are signal processing processors, there are other signal processing processors, they do not implement everything starting from adding adder subtractors, because if your primary requirement is an integration, let's assume that you are doing some integration, so why not to implement the integration function directly in the circuit itself? Okay, instead of implementing, you know that integration can be implemented just by using the standard adder, subtract, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division operations. So why not to optimize it directly to the integration? So when we talk about application specific designing, we can optimize the circuit for that application, which may not be generic in nature. However, processors are generic in nature. That's why in processors, we do not provide those circuits. We know that processors are not designed only to perform integration and other complex mathematical operations. Rather, they do many more things. So why not to make it generic in nature? Okay. So that is the philosophy of computer architecture. We don't make the processor too specific. We make it more generic in nature so that any application can exploit the generic facilities and they can run. Okay. So the next part, so that finishes the addition subtraction circuit. I'm not explaining. I know that you know that how subtraction works. Okay. The next part which I would like to discuss with you is the multiplication circuit. Multiplication circuit, let me again switch on my camera. Now, multiplication, if you observe the characteristics, we usually do it like this. I'm not writing any number, but this placement of the numbers are important. If you see, when you do multiplication on copy, you'll find that we actually get the results like this. How we get this becomes the result. And the carry will come here. So 4-bit numbers, so 4 cross 4, 4-bit numbers. These are not numbers, these are 4-bit numbers. So one 4-bit is multiplied by another 4-bit. You can get maximum 8-bit results. Okay, so this will be the result. Now you know that what is going to happen here. And you know that how this one will interact with the next block. So if you arrange these blocks properly, okay, in a 2-dimensional array fashion like this, you can actually generate a multiplier circuit. Now that is what basically is given in the book. Now let me share my screen again. Is my screen visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, now look into this. I'm not designing the circuit because this will unnecessarily take time. Now see that this arrangement I was talking about. So where from the top the multiplicand comes, okay, M0, M1, M2 and M3. This is multiplicand. That means this 1101, the value 1101 comes from top. Okay. Also it takes a 0 input for the first partial result because the initial partial result is not available. So you assume that initial partial result is 0, which is basically used to add it. So don't worry. This first partial result which comes through here, it's basically added. That's why there is a full adder available. What it does, carefully look into this circuit. It does AND operation with the corresponding multiplier bit. This is the multiplier bit. Ideally what we do, we multiply this with this. This multiplication is nothing but ANDing operation. 1-bit multiplication is ANDing. Okay. So that's why the multiplier bit which is coming through this is the Q bit, and this Q bit is Qi, we represented ith multiplier bit, which is actually ANDed with the jth multiplicand bit. Jth multiplicand bit, this AND operation. So you do this, and what it will do also, it will add the value with the previous partial result. Now see the next position, when this next bit comes here, the partial result which is here must be added with that one. That's why this partial result comes here. In addition to that, what it takes, because it result also produces the carry, so that carry goes here. So that's why this carry comes. So a simple block like this, where the multiplier bit comes here, the multiplicand comes from top, both are ANDed and added with the previous partial product, okay, that you received during the ith operation, because this is happening here. and then it is added with the product of the multiplier multiplied with or ANDed with the multiplicand, and it takes the carry as input, it produces the carry out, this one, and this multiplier bit actually goes to the next block. So this bit Q0 bit goes here, 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 here. So these arrows can be ignored. If you are implementing 4 cross 4, it is not needed. These arrows can be ignored. This is the simple gate level implementation of an array multiplier. Now again, the delay will come, because the longest delay, you can understand that this one is dependent on so many factors. This particular block is dependent on this. So accordingly, you can actually calculate the delay. So the final delay will be, you can calculate the final delay depending on how many blocks are here, how the blocks are arranged. You can actually calculate it. So if this let's assume that every block has tau amount of delay. This is tau. Okay, so this one will be tau plus 2 tau. This one will be maximum path is 2 tau. So this will be 2 tau. This is 1, 2, 3. This is 3 tau. This one, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was maximum path. So any particular block, you'll have to understand that the maximum path. Probably this one 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here you will get 5. It's 5 tau because it also requires the input from here. Okay, so this way you can calculate that what will be the time taken by here. So probably, if I am right, it may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can calculate that basically how much time it will. So you'll have to, before that, you'll have to calculate the delay of each and every one intermediate things. Okay, then you can calculate the delay of this one. So if the size increases, you can you know that how much time it will take. It will take a lot of time. Okay, so this is basically array multiplier, multiplying the numbers using array. The second one is a sequential multiplier. I hope that this has also been discussed in your digital electronic circuit. The simple sequential multiplication. Sequential multiplication means you have the multiplicand here, which will be, you see that multiplicand passes through a multiplexer. Okay, either it will take a 0 input or it will take the multiplicand input depending on the condition of the current multiplier bit. That's why this multiplexer either selects the multiplicand or selects a set of 0. You see, because if the multiplier bit is 0, then the multiplicand value becomes 0. 0 into something equals to 0. That's why depending, this add, no add and control comes from here itself. Okay, so whether it will be added with multiplicand or whether will be added with 0, this decision is taken by the current bit position of the multiplier, and this multiplier and the result register, or which is called register A, is basically designed using a shift register. So every bit, the least significant bit of the multiplier comes out of here. If that bit is 0, then 0 will be added with the partial result. Partial result is basically shifted result. You see, because this is entirely the shift register. This position is shift register, and this n bit adder, actually adds the n bit multiplicand with the most significant n bit of the partial result, and again it stores back and then it shifts it. So this is basically simple sequential multiplier circuit. If you have any doubt about this circuit, you can ask me. Intentionally I did not draw it because it will take time. You can tell me if you have any doubt about this circuit, that how it works. So here one thing is that this adder again creates a problem, because even if you implement carry save adder or ripple carry adder, it takes some time. So can we avoid these addition operations? Simple thing is that even if the multiplier bit is 0, you are adding. You are adding with 0, but you are adding. So the information actually passes through this n bit adder, even if one of the adder inputs here, is basically, even if one of the adder inputs is 0, still the adder works. Still the adder works. Or still the adder is active. So if the adder is active, it takes time. So that is the optimization which is done in a advanced sequential adder with the help of Booth's multiplier. Okay. Now in Booth multiplier, what happens? We carefully observe the bits of the multiplier. Let us see that. So you basically you want to add, or we want to multiply some number with 30, any number with 30. Now if you carefully look into it, 30, when it is represented in, this is basically 7-bit representation. Okay, 7-bit representation. So you have, this is the representation of 30, binary representation of 30 like this. So even if you skip addition during those during those 3 zeros, like these zeros, you don't need addition, because you know that they are only shifting will be sufficient. You don't need addition operation. But there are 4 consecutive ones and you require 4 additions. Now 4 addition, each addition has its own time. It takes time. So is it possible to reduce this number of additions? That is the primary objective. Okay. So to do that, what is basically presented in Booth algorithm is that you represent the multiplier as a sum of a set of multipliers, okay, where the total number of bits which are 1, they are less. If you look into it, 30 can be represented by 32 minus 2. And how many bits are there? How many ones are there in 32? 1. How many ones are there in 2? 1. So essentially what I am saying here is, let me again switch on my camera. What I am saying that if x into y, z equals to x into y, what we are trying to do is that we do z equals to x into a plus b, where y equals to a plus b. Now the question is, why do we do? We know that when y equals to a plus b, then I can replace x into y equals to x into a plus b. With an objective in the current context, what we actually achieve here is that because our primary objective is to reduce the number of addition operations. Addition operations are time consuming operations. Even if you implement carry, look ahead, adder, it also takes order of log and time. So the input is dependent on the time is dependent on the size of the input, which is the main blocking factor of any circuit design. The time of a circuit should not be dependent on the input size. Even if it is log n, if the value of n is very large, then log n can also be very large. Even if it is log n, if the value of n is large, then log n will also be large. It may not be as large as n, but it will be large. And if the value of n is small, log n will be small. So that means the output will be produced depending on the size of the input. And that is what we do not want. We want a behavior like a random memory access. Whenever you give an address, irrespective of whether the address is the first address or the last address, you must get the result within a fixed amount of time. No less time, no more time. And that is the primary requirement of designing good circuits. Because we do not put restrictions on the input. The design philosophy is this, that we should not put any restriction on the user that what will be your input, and depending on your input it will take time. Obviously it is there in algorithm, we always talk about it. If the input is large, time taken will be large, but for circuits we can't do it because these are generic circuits. Okay, so we can't make it a straight line kind of thing, but obviously we'll make the line as straight as possible. There will be some glitches. It may not be a nicely drawn straight line, but we try to make the line as straight as possible so that the output the time of output, when you are going to get the output, it should not be, or it should be less dependent on the size of the input, as simple as it is. So from that perspective, we should always try to see that where things can be improved. That is the reason we actually came to this point. When z equals to x into y, when y can be represented as a plus b, if by doing this, if I can reduce, because this x into a plus x into b, this multiplication can be done faster. Again, faster means we have already observed that this fast, whether it will be fast because x is common, whether it will be faster or slower, it depends on a and b. Now somehow if we are able to decompose y in two parts, such an a and b, so that this multiplication gets faster, that is what the objective of Booth's multiplication. So we represent the multiplier in such a way that the number of ones are less. So that is done using Booth's multiplier, and the recording of Booth's multiplier is something like that. So if you basically look into it, so any number which is given, you can actually convert it into any number with any multiplier, rather I would say any multiplier which is binary multiplier which is given, it can be converted into a Booth's multiplier. So that Booth's multiplier assumption is like that. if the multiplier bit I minus 1 is 0 and bit I equals to 0, the version of the multiplicand selected by bit I is 0 into minus n. If it is 1 to 0, it is plus 1 into minus n. If it is 0 to 1, it is minus 1, means it's basically subtraction. It's basically subtraction. Okay. If it is 1 to 1, it is 0. So that means if this is the multiplier, this is the original multiplier minus 6. Okay, and it also works for negative numbers. So I need to first convert this multiplier into, let me again share my screen. Yeah, so the Booth's multiplier recording table looks like this. If the bit number I minus 1 is 0 and bit number I, this is all of multiplier bits. Bit number I minus 1 is 0 and bit number I is 0, then you multiply 0 with the multiplicand. If the bit number I minus 1 is 1, bit number I is 0, you multiply multiplicand with plus 1. If the bit number I minus 1 is 0, bit number I is 1, you multiply the multiplicand with minus 1. If both the bits are consecutive bits are 1 1, then you multiply with 0. Now this is the logic, this is the recording of the Booth multiplier. Now given an input like this, okay, we need to generate the Booth multiplier for this one. Assuming that the initial is 0, initial bit is 0, so 0 to 0 is 0, then 0 to 1, 0 to 1 is minus 1, then 1 to 0, 1 to 0 is plus 1, then 1 to 1 is 0. So always you assume that at the beginning there is a 0. So that's why this is the Booth multiplier. Now this plus 1 and minus 1 is basically subtraction and addition. You know that in case of subtraction, you basically sign extend it. Okay. So minus 1 means you extend the sign. Plus 1 means you don't extend, you extend it with 0. That's it. And that ensures that the result what you get it is the correct results. If you take the 2's complement of the number, you get the correct result. So because this is if the sign bit is 1, you know that in 2's complement representation, it's a negative number. Okay, so minus 78 in 2's complement representation becomes this. Now what is the advantage? The advantage here is that it may not be advantage here in the current case because we have 3 number of additions here. If you see that there are 1 0 addition, another 0 addition. So we don't get much benefit here itself. But we will get benefit when the multiplier is of good like this. If you see the block of ones here in the original multiplier, when they are converted to Booth's multiplier, the number of ones either plus 1 or minus 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 additions instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 additions. Okay. So you can skip the adder so many times, at least for this example. This is a good multiplier, example of a good multiplier. You can actually skip this. So if you apply the original multiplier, your adder should be active 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. If it is a Booth multiplier, your adder should be active 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So you are saving 4 time addition time. That's a good, achievement. Now in the ordinary multiplier, when the number of ones in the ordinary multiplier and Booth multiplier are same, almost same, you don't get much benefit. So an ordinary multiplier like this, you generate also almost same number of ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 and 7 almost same. You don't get much benefit. What about this kind of scenario? This is a worst multiplier. If you basically apply Booth multiplier, because every alternate bits are changing, so essentially the Booth multiplier becomes -1 + 1 -1 + 1. You need more number of additions if you use Booth multiplier for this case. You need almost similar number of multiplication if the multiplier is this. You need a very good achievement. You need a very good achievement when the multiplier is basically of this type. Okay. So these are 3 case studies which I wanted to show you that a Booth multiplier can be a good multiplier, can be an ordinary multiplier, can be a bad multiplier also. So depending on the scenario, you can actually select that whether Booth multiplier can. In some applications, typically in network applications, you will see, probably you will see in the next semester, there are many operations where there are particular bit patterns are generated. We call it preamble bits in a network packet. The initial portion of the network packet contains a set of bits which are of a particular type. So let me give you an example. In network packet, what happens? Usually we send the payload here, the data 1011, whatever may be. It may be a long payload, maybe 64 byte. But how do you know that starting of the payload? We fix it something, we call it header. This is header, this is trailer. Now header bits are usually kept it like this. Okay, this is a particular pattern which is appended with the message to ensure that this is the starting of the message, this is the end of the message. The patterns can change also. Now this sort of patterns are, you can look into it, these patterns are, a pattern can be 0 followed by 6 ones, then 0. If such patterns are used and they need to be processed, then Booth multiplier can work. So that's why Booth multiplier is not a solution for making fast multiplication always. It can even make your life worse. But it is one of the ways to look into the prospect of designing good multipliers, depending on the application. Okay. So this is what I wanted to tell you. That's all about the whole syllabus, and I have finished it. Now we can have discussions. So you go ahead with your queries, discussion. I will upload all the lecture notes and everything, but my point is whatever I have discussed in the class, you don't actually need any lecture notes. If you basically followed my class notes, all questions you will be able to answer it. Okay, and the same is true for Professor course part also. I will upload the documents which are available with me right now after this class. So whatever available with me. But believe me, if you have followed my classes, you do not need to worry about the notes. Okay. Guys, no queries, nothing. It
The
means
detailed syllabus. The detailed syllabus.
क्या detailed syllabus में what do you want in detailed syllabus? Tell me.
Topics.
आप
Like,
ये बोल दो ना सर, बता दो क्वेश्चन क्या है.
नहीं सर, जैसे चैप्टर 9 अभी आपने पढ़ाया तो उसमें पूरा तो नहीं समझा, तो लाइक उसमें बहुत कुछ है फिर भी, बट लाइक इट इज टिल सेक्शन 9.4. सो
कौन सा चैप्टर तुम which बुक बोल रहे हो? ये जो अभी मैं अरिथमेटिक बोल रहा था.
यस सर.
अरिथमेटिक में जो टॉपिक मैंने आज बोला है ना, only those topics that you know it.
यस सर.
Exactly only those topics, nothing more, nothing less.
Okay. Sir, in like from course or part, do we need to know like 8279 and
No. Those details are not needed. Only 8255 is needed. Even though if there is any question of 8255, the basic requirements for 8255 programming, which is required, I will give it in the question. Don't worry. You
So
do
it-
not need to know the internal architecture of any one of those chips.
so only 8255 and 8085 are.
Yes.
सर मतलब जो 8255 और 8085 बाकी कोई भी चिप नहीं है.
चिप के अंदर का किसी 8255 का भी इंटरनल पार्ट कुछ नहीं है, नथिंग इज देयर. Whatever 8255 I have discussed it, that is the part. Okay.
जो लैब में डिस्कस किया था आपने.
Lab, I told you na, the lab and theory there is no difference because I am taking the same subject. Okay. उसमें कोई difference नहीं है. जो lab है वही theory है. That is what I already made you clear. I told you. Because the same portion I am taking, I know that which part is there and which part is not there. Pipelining, I have discussed so many things, and cache memory also. We look into those chapters carefully. Cache memory is up to date map cache. Okay. And how to solve the problems given in the book of Hamacher. At the end of the chapter, you will find you will find the problems. Okay. Particularly in pipelining and cache memory. Okay. You will get the answers. And the बोलो.
मेमोरी मैनेजमेंट में you taught us
कुछ नहीं है.
SRAM
Memory management is not there in your syllabus. Okay.
Oh, okay.
बोलो और.
सर प्रोफेसर करके पार्ट को थोड़ा सा डिटेल बता सकते हो क्या कि क्या क्या आएगा उसमें.
You learn, I mean, you follow up more about the 8085 interrupt structures. Okay, how the interrupts are handled. Okay, that part you focus more because he primarily talked about that IO interfacing through interrupt. Okay, and memory mapped IO. So memory mapped IO and IO mapped IO, these are the two techniques he discussed in details. Okay. No internal chip details required like 8259 internal, 8279 internal, 8255 internal, nothing is required. Okay. But interrupt classification, different ways how interrupts are classified, that you must learn carefully. Okay.
Yes sir. और वो चैप्टर 7 में जो बसेस वगैरह थी.
हाँ, bus that you studied. Different types of buses. Synchronous bus, asynchronous bus. Okay. Signaling, all these things you.
बट वो नहीं ना पढ़ना लाइक PCI एक्सप्रेस है भी है
नहीं,
HDMI.
वो सब चीज तो just for information. Those things are just for information. So how did you enjoy this course? I would like to know also whether what you feel that this should not be here, this should not be there, this should be changed, this should be modified. Okay, let me know your opinion so that I can also improve my competency.
So basically, pen and paper is the best way for online classes because the slides start to go over the head very fast.
Yes.
Yeah, that is why.
Yes sir.
Yeah, that I know that. That is the reason basically I 80% of the time I actually used, more than 80% time I used pen and papers. Even that makes me, I may be teaching a slightly slow space, at a slow space, but that helps to, ultimately my objective is to transfer the knowledge. Okay. So your understanding should be clear. So I felt also that pen and paper based teaching gives much more in a scientific way to convey my thoughts to you. And probably you can also concentrate on the exact word I am writing. If I do mistakes, you point it out. All these things are there in pen and paper based systems or in chalk and talk systems. So even last, 1.5 years while I am teaching in online mode, I think 90% time I have used pen and paper based things. Okay. Because that gives the freedom of expressing my own way. Slides are, even if I design my own slides or if I basically borrow somebody else's slides, there are, and also it's a kind of, students will often say that, okay, slides are moving very fast. Okay. And there are so many documents presented at the same time. When I basically, what is the problem with slide based teaching? I'll tell you. Say, if I project one particular slide, there may be many contents on the slide. So students will not be focusing line by line unless animations are given in the slide. Now the point is, designing slides with animations, all these things take time. Okay. So that's why when I am writing something, you are following the current word I am writing. So that's the good part. Okay. And also I was trying, because I've been teaching this course maybe for 5-6 years now, this particular course. Every year when I compile the class notes for the entire semester, next year it will be completely different. I'm sure it is, the order is also not the same and the volume